So we unfortunately have to have today what is a very real but admittedly depressing conversation, and it's really about the future of the United States, be it Biden or Trump who wins in November. And I want to approach this from a slightly different angle. So let me sort of set it up for you. The starting point is that in all likelihood, more than 60 million Americans are going to vote for 4 more years of Donald Trump in November. They will have seen what we saw for the last 3.5 years, and they're going to say, I'm going to vote for 4 more years of that. And the important context here is that certainly, depending on who wins the election, we are changing the direction of the country in the sense that if Donald Trump gets another 4 years, that's one direction. If Joe Biden replaces Donald Trump, that's a completely different direction. But I was having a conversation yesterday with former producer Lewis, and we were talking about sort of the outlook for the country. And inevitably, these discussions come up about, if Biden wins, then this, or if the Senate goes to Democrats, then that, or if Trump, then this other path goes forward. And of course, the November election results are going to have major consequences. We've been looking at policy differences over the last several months. And when you look at tax policy, yesterday, Donald Trump, during his press briefing, saying that he would actually be cutting the capital gains tax, whereas Joe Biden wants to tax capital gains as ordinary income, which would be, these are really large differences in policy. Look at Green New Deal elements that Joe Biden is including in his climate plan versus what Donald Trump has done. Just look at almost any policy and you see that these are very different trajectories. But there's a really big difference in terms of outcome versus the makeup of the country. And when it comes to voting, in all likelihood, somewhere between 60 million and 66 million people are going to vote for Donald Trump. And maybe the range is a little bigger. Maybe it's like at least 58 million and probably no more than 68 million people are going to vote for Donald Trump. But around 60 million people are going to say, this is the guy I want. So the point I'm making is that even if we set the country on a different path in January by electing Joe Biden in November, if Donald Trump is indeed removed, somewhere around half of the voters will have voted for Donald Trump. And this is not trivial. This has real consequences day to day for you and for me beyond what the president does. So certainly, if you think about climate, putting in Biden instead of Trump will make a massive difference. But depending on where you live, half of the school committee you might be involved in will be made up of Trump voters. Police officers, doctors, accountants, the people that we are going to be interacting with on a daily basis, even if Joe Biden ekes out a win over Donald Trump from the standpoint of the Electoral College, these folks aren't going away, and their ideology doesn't get changed or fixed because their candidate loses the Electoral College. And I don't know what the answer to that is. And we've talked before in these segments about Trumpism doesn't end when Donald Trump leaves office, be it in January or January of 2025. That's not just a catchphrase. It's not trivial. It's not unimportant. It's extraordinary, really. And how do we start thinking about that? Because it's such a bigger issue. And, there's this phrase that's often mentioned. It's something like, Trump didn't create racists, but they're just more comfortable out in public right now. Much along the same lines, Donald Trump did not create anti-intellectualism or pseudo-intellectualism. We've done interviews and I've explained to you that those ideologies have been around since the 1800s in some form approximating what we have today. And they have been coalesced into a sort of voting bloc at this point. We saw it with George W. Bush and we see it even more with Donald Trump. And so this is a bigger picture issue. There's no doubt that much more than George W. Bush, Donald Trump has sort of coalesced and emboldened this non-thinking crowd. But once the election's over and hopefully Trump leaves this January, it might not be until January of 2025, it remains to be seen, what happens with that anti-intellectual, non-thinking Trumpist ideology that doesn't go away? What happens in the Senate? What happens in the House of Representatives? This is not trivial, and it's something that we really have to think about. And no matter who wins the presidency, there will be somewhere around 60 to 65 million people who say, what I saw the last 3.5 years, I voted for more of it. Hopefully they won't get it, but we'll still have to deal with those people. And that gets me to the next topic I want to discuss with you today, which actually relates to the popular vote, sort of in this context. So let's talk about that next. If you love feeding your intellectual curiosity, but you're always struggling to find the time, check out one of my all-time favorite apps called Blinkist. Blinkist lets you consume an entire book on your way home from work. They take thousands of popular nonfiction books, condense each one into text or audio that you can get through in just 15 minutes, and you get all of the important core ideas and information from that book. It's perfect if you don't have enough time to do all the reading you want to do, or if you just want to sample a book before you buy the entire thing. I recently read A Brief History of Time, of course, by the great Stephen Hawking. This is a book that I have been aware of for so long, and other things got in the way, and it was fantastic to check it out on Blinkist. Blinkist has books on politics, philosophy, science. They have 27 different nonfiction categories, and a subscription is only about $8 a month, and you get the entire library. But you can try it totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/Pakman. I've put the link right underneath this video.